The rain hammered against the windshield of Rachel Brennan's silver Honda Accord as she sat in the parking lot of the Cascade View Motel, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. It was a Thursday afternoon in late March 2010, and the Oregon sky had turned the color of bruised plums, heavy with the kind of storm that made the Douglas firs bend and sway along Highway 26. She had driven 40 minutes from their home in Portland's West Hills neighborhood, following a hunch that had gnawed at her gut for weeks, no months, if she was being honest with herself. Marcus had been distant, more than distant. He'd become a stranger who shared her bed but not her life. The late-night phone calls he'd take in his office, door closed, voice barely a murmur. The weekend business trips that seemed to multiply like weeds. The way he'd stopped looking her in the eyes when he said he loved her. The words falling flat and hollow between them like coins dropped on concrete. Rachel was 41 years old, with shoulder-length auburn hair that she'd stopped dyeing to hide the gray, and green eyes that her mother always said could see straight through to a person's soul. She'd been married to Marcus for 16 years, together for 19. They'd met at a charity fundraiser in downtown Portland, where he'd been the charismatic commercial real estate developer who made everyone in the room feel like they were the only person worth talking to. She'd been working as a pediatric nurse at OHSU, passionate about her work with sick children, grounded in a way that seemed to balance his ambition. They'd built what she thought was a good life, a beautiful craftsman home with a view of Mount Hood on clear days. No children. They'd tried for years before accepting it wasn't meant to be, but they'd poured their energy into their careers, their travels, their carefully curated life of dinner parties and wine tastings and weekend hikes in the Columbia River Gorge. But something had shifted. Rachel couldn't pinpoint exactly when, but looking back, she'd say it was about 8 months ago, August 2009. Marcus had landed a major development deal in Bend, a luxury mixed-use property that would cement his reputation beyond Portland's metropolitan area. He'd been ecstatic, celebrating with expensive champagne and plans for their future. But then came the long absences, the distracted kisses goodbye, the smell of unfamiliar perfume that clung to his shirt collars, despite his explanations of crowded client meetings. Rachel had hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago, a woman named Dana Cross, former Portland PD, who worked out of a modest office in Southeast Portland and came highly recommended from a friend who'd gone through her own marital nightmare. Dana had been methodical, professional, and unfortunately, effective. She'd called Rachel 2 hours ago with an address, a room number, and a simple statement. "You'll want to see this yourself, I'm sorry." Now Rachel sat in the motel parking lot watching room 217 through the rain-streaked window. The Cascade View Motel was the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour or the week, with peeling paint on the exterior doors and a flickering neon sign that buzzed like angry wasps. It was nestled in a grove of evergreens just off the highway, the kind of place you'd drive past 1,000 times without really seeing. The kind of place where people went when they didn't want to be found. Marcus's black BMW was parked 3 spots down from where Rachel sat. She'd memorized that license plate years ago, 7HBK293. The personalized plate he'd wanted had been taken, so he'd settled for the random assignment, joking that it sounded like a robot serial number. She used to find his jokes charming. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dana. "I'm parked on the north side if you need backup. You don't have to do this alone." But Rachel did have to do this alone. This was her marriage, her betrayal, her moment of truth. She typed back, "I'm going in." She stepped out of the car, and the rain immediately soaked through her jacket. March in Oregon was unforgiving, the cold seeming to seep into your bones and settle there. She walked across the parking lot, her sneakers splashing through puddles that reflected the gray sky like mirrors to nowhere. Each step felt surreal, like she was watching herself from a distance. A character in someone else's story. Room 217 was on the 2nd floor, accessible by an exterior staircase that creaked under her weight. The door was painted a faded teal, the numbers hanging slightly crooked. Rachel could hear voices inside, muffled but unmistakably Marcus's deep baritone and a woman's laugh, light and carefree. Her hand trembled as she raised it to knock. For a moment she hesitated. Once she knocked on this door, there was no going back. The marriage she'd known, whether it was real or an illusion, would be over. The life she'd carefully constructed would shatter like glass. She knocked. 3 sharp raps that echoed in the exterior walkway. The voices inside stopped abruptly. Footsteps approached. The door opened a crack, and Marcus's face appeared, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition to horror in the span of a heartbeat. Rachel. His voice was barely a whisper. What are you? How did you? She pushed past him, into the dimly lit room that smelled of cheap air freshener, and something else. Something intimate that made her stomach turn. And there, sitting on the edge of the unmade bed in a hotel robe, was Jennifer Hale. Jennifer, Marcus's assistant. The 28-year-old brunette with the perfect smile and the efficiency that had made Marcus's business run like clockwork for the past 2 years. Rachel had met her at office parties, had made small talk about Jennifer's apartment search and her sister's wedding, had thought of her as part of their extended professional family. Mrs. Brennan, Jennifer said, standing up quickly, her face going pale. This isn't, we were just, don't. Rachel's voice came out cold, controlled, surprising even herself. Don't insult me by lying. Not now. Marcus closed the door behind them, running his hand through his salt and pepper hair. A nervous gesture Rachel knew too well. He was 45, still handsome in that distinguished way that seemed to improve with age for men, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt that Rachel had ironed for him last week. The domesticity of that detail hit her like a physical blow. Rachel, please let me explain, Marcus began, his voice taking on that smooth, persuasive tone he used in negotiations. This isn't what you think. Jennifer and we've been under so much stress with the Ben project and things just... How long? Rachel interrupted, her eyes fixed on him. How long have you been sleeping with her? The silence that followed was deafening. Rain pounded on the roof, water dripping from a leak in the corner into a rusty bucket. Jennifer pulled the robe tighter around herself, looking like she wanted to disappear into the stained carpet. 6 months, Marcus finally admitted, his shoulders sagging. It started last September. After the Ben deal closed, we were celebrating it. 6 months. Rachel repeated the words, testing their weight. 6 months of lies. 6 months of him coming home to her, kissing her goodnight, making love to her while this existed in parallel. Did you ever plan to tell me? Or were you just going to keep living your double life until I was too old to care? It's not like that. Jennifer spoke up, her voice shaking. We didn't mean for this to happen. We tried to stop, but what? Rachel turned to her, fury finally breaking through her shock. But you loved him too much? But it was too hard to keep your hands off my husband. Do you have any idea what you've destroyed? Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Brennan. You're right. There's no excuse for what we've done. Marcus stepped between them, his hands raised as if physically trying to keep the situation from exploding. Rachel, please, let's go home. Let's talk about this privately. We can work through this. I love you. I've always loved you. This thing with Jennifer, it's just been a mistake, a terrible mistake that I'll regret for the rest of my life. Rachel looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. Oh, the man she'd married, the man she'd built a life with, had somehow been replaced by this person who could lie so easily, who could compartmentalize his life so completely. I want you out of the house, she said quietly. Tonight. Pack your things and leave. I'll have my lawyer contact you tomorrow. Rachel, get out of my life, Marcus. She turned and walked out of the room, down the creaking stairs, through the rain that now felt cleansing rather than cold. She didn't look back, didn't let herself fall apart until she was safely in her car, door locked, surrounded by the privacy of her own space. Then the tears came, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for the 16 years of marriage that had been built on what now felt like sand. She cried for the future children she'd never have with him, for the retirement they'd planned, for every dream that had just turned to ash. She cried until she had nothing left, until she was empty and numb. Her phone buzzed. Dana, are you okay? Do you need me? Rachel wiped her eyes, took a shaky breath, and started the engine. I'm okay. Thank you for everything. I'll call you next week about the divorce proceedings. As she pulled out of the parking lot, she saw Marcus emerge from the room, standing at the top of the stairs watching her leave. She didn't wave, didn't acknowledge him at all. He was already part of her past. The drive back to Portland was a blur of rain and headlights, and the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers. Rachel's mind raced with practical concerns. Lawyers, asset division, who would keep the house, how to tell their friends and families. The mechanics of dismantling a life. She had no way of knowing that in 48 hours, none of those concerns would matter, that Marcus Brennan would vanish without a trace, and her life would transform from a simple story of infidelity into something far more complex, far more sinister, that she would become the prime suspect in a disappearance that would haunt Oregon for years to come. But for now, driving through the rain-soaked Oregon evening, Rachel Brennan was just a woman whose heart had been broken, trying to figure out how to put the pieces back together. 48 hours after the confrontation at the Cascade View Motel, Marcus Brennan disappeared. It was Saturday morning, March 27, 2010, when Rachel received the first phone call that would change everything. She'd spent the past 2 days in a fog of grief and rage, alternating between crying jags and manic cleaning sessions, where she scrubbed every surface of their home, as if she could somehow erase Marcus's presence from the walls. He'd come by on Thursday night to collect some clothes and essentials, the interaction brief and agonizingly civil. He'd taken a suitcase, his laptop, and some toiletries, telling her he'd booked a room at the Hotel Lucia downtown while they figured things out. Rachel had responded with silence, unable to trust herself to speak without screaming. After he left, she'd changed all the locks. Now her phone was ringing at 7:43 a.m., an unknown number lighting up the screen. She almost didn't answer, assuming it was a telemarketer or wrong number, but something made her pick up. "Mrs. Brennan? This is Detective Sarah Chen with Portland Police Bureau. I need to ask you some questions about your husband, Marcus Brennan." Rachel sat up in bed, her heart suddenly racing. "What's happened? Is he hurt?" "That's what we're trying to determine, ma'am. When was the last time you saw or spoke with your husband?" "Thursday night. He came to collect some things. We're separating." "Why? What's going on?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, the sound of papers shuffling. "Mrs. Brennan, your husband's business partner, David Kowalski, reported him missing this morning. Apparently, Marcus was supposed to drive to Bend yesterday for a meeting with investors regarding their development project. He never arrived. His car was found abandoned at the Vista Point overlook on Highway 26, about 60 miles east of Portland." Rachel felt the room tilt. "Abandoned? What do you mean abandoned?" "The vehicle was discovered by a passing motorist around 6 p.m. yesterday evening. Keys in the ignition, driver's door unlocked, your husband's wallet and phone still inside, but no sign of Marcus himself. We need you to come down to the Central Precinct to answer some questions." Am I a suspect?" Rachel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "At this point, we're just gathering information. Can you be here within the hour?" Rachel agreed and ended the call, her mind reeling. She sat on the edge of her bed staring at her hands as they trembled. Marcus was missing. His car abandoned in the mountains. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. She dressed quickly in jeans and a sweater, pulled her hair into a ponytail and grabbed her purse. The drive to the Central Precinct on Southwest 2nd Avenue took 20 minutes through light Saturday morning traffic. Portland was just waking up, the city wrapped in its typical spring drizzle, the streets slick and gray under a low sky. Detective Sarah Chen was a petite woman in her mid-30s with sharp, intelligent eyes and black hair, pulled back in a tight bun. She met Rachel in the lobby and led her to a small interview room that smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. The walls were painted a depressing beige and a camera blinked red from the corner of the ceiling. "Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" Detective Chen asked, settling into a chair across from Rachel. "No, thank you. I just want to know what happened to my husband." Chen opened a manila folder and pulled out several photographs. "These were taken at the scene where we found Marcus's vehicle." She slid them across the table. Rachel picked up the photos with shaking hands. The first showed Marcus's black BMW parked at an angle in a gravel pullout, evergreen trees towering on all sides. The Vista Point overlook. She'd been there before with Marcus years ago, when they'd first moved to Oregon. It offered a stunning view of the Cascade Mountains on clear days, but it was also isolated, the kind of place where you could go hours without seeing another car. The next photo showed the interior of the car. Marcus's leather wallet sat on the dashboard, clearly visible. His iPhone was in the cup holder. The keys dangled from the ignition. His wallet contained $460 in cash, all his credit cards, his driver's license, Chen explained. "The phone was locked, but our tech team is working on accessing it. There were no signs of struggle in or around the vehicle. No blood, no damage to the car. Nothing to indicate foul play at the scene itself." "This doesn't make any sense," Rachel said, studying the photos. "Why would Marcus just leave his car like this? Where would he go without his wallet or phone?" "That's what we're trying to determine." Chen leaned forward, her expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Brennan, I need you to be completely honest with me. I understand you and your husband were experiencing marital difficulties." Rachel's stomach dropped. "How do you know that?" "David Kowalski mentioned that Marcus had told him about some problems at home, and we've already spoken with Jennifer Hale, Marcus's assistant. She told us about the incident at the Cascade View Motel on Thursday." Heat flooded Rachel's face. Shame, anger, humiliation all mixed together. Yes, I discovered my husband was having an affair. I confronted them. I asked Marcus to leave, but I didn't. I would never hurt him, no matter how angry I was. Where were you yesterday, Friday, March 26th, between noon and 6 p.m.? At work. I'm a pediatric nurse at OHSU. I worked a full shift, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. You can check with my supervisor, with anyone on my floor. There are cameras everywhere in the hospital. Chen made notes, nodding. We'll verify that. Did Marcus contact you at all yesterday? No. We hadn't spoken since Thursday night when he picked up his things. Did he seem upset? Depressed? Was there any indication he might harm himself? Rachel considered this. She'd been so consumed by her own pain that she hadn't really looked at Marcus's emotional state during their brief interaction. He seemed guilty, apologetic, but not suicidal, if that's what you're asking. Marcus wasn't the type. He was always about problem solving, about moving forward. Was your husband involved in anything that might have put him at risk? Gambling? Drugs? Did he owe money to anyone? No, God, no. Marcus was successful. His business was thriving. He didn't gamble, barely drank. He was obsessed with his work and apparently with his assistant, but that's it. Chen pulled out another document. We've started looking into his financial records. Did you know that Marcus withdrew $20,000 in cash from your joint savings account 3 weeks ago? Rachel's head snapped up. What? No, I had no idea. Why would he do that? We were hoping you could tell us. I don't know. We had separate checking accounts but a joint savings. I rarely looked at it. It was supposed to be for retirement, for emergencies. Rachel felt a new wave of betrayal wash over her. What else didn't I know about him? That's what we're investigating. Chen closed her folder and fixed Rachel with a steady gaze. Mrs. Brennan, I'm going to be direct with you. In cases like this, when a married person disappears shortly after a major conflict, the spouse is always our primary person of interest. Your alibi will help, assuming it checks out, but I need you to understand the situation you're in. I didn't do anything to Marcus, Rachel said firmly. Yes, I was furious with him. Yes, I wanted him out of my life, but I'm a nurse. I save lives. I don't destroy them. Whatever happened to him, I had nothing to do with it. What about Jennifer Hale? Any chance she might have been involved? Rachel had wondered the same thing during the drive to the precinct. I don't know, she seemed genuinely shocked when I caught them. But I don't really know her. I don't know what she's capable of. We're bringing her in for questioning this afternoon. We're also talking to everyone at Marcus's company, his business partner, anyone who might have information. Chen stood up, signaling the interview was ending. If you think of anything at all, that might help us understand where Marcus went or why, you call me immediately. Here's my card. Rachel took the card, the edges sharp against her palm. You think he's still alive, don't you? You think he ran away? Chen's expression softened slightly. Honestly, I don't know. The way the scene was staged, wallet and phone left behind, keys in the ignition, it could be someone trying to make it look like foul play. Or it could be Marcus trying to make it look like he was abducted when really he just wanted to disappear. We see it sometimes. People who want to escape their lives. But why leave the money? The credit cards? Maybe he had other resources we don't know about yet. The cash withdrawal suggests he was planning something. Rachel left the precinct in a daze, stepping out into the misty Portland morning. The city moved around her. Joggers in rain gear, families heading to Saturday breakfast spots, the streetcar rumbling past, but she felt disconnected from all of it, like she was watching life happen behind a thick pane of glass. Her phone rang. David Kowalski, Marcus's business partner and best friend since college. Rachel, I just heard. I'm so sorry. This is unbelievable. David, what the hell is going on? The police said you reported him missing? He never showed up to the investor meeting in Bend. This was huge, Rachel. These investors flew in from San Francisco. Marcus would never blow something like this off. When I couldn't reach him, I drove the route he would have taken and found his car. I'm the one who called the police. Did he seem off to you lately? Did he say anything about leaving? About having problems? David hesitated. He told me about the separation, about Jennifer. He was torn up about it, but he wasn't falling apart. He was Marcus, already planning how to handle the divorce, how to minimize damage to the business. That's why this doesn't make sense. Marcus doesn't run from problems. He faces them head on. Detective Chen said he withdrew $20,000 in cash 3 weeks ago. Did you know about that? No. Jesus. What was he doing with that kind of money? They talked for a few more minutes, but neither of them had answers. When Rachel hung up, She sat in her car in the precinct parking lot, watching the rain stream down the windshield. Somewhere out there, Marcus was either dead or hiding, and Rachel realized with a cold, creeping horror that she didn't actually know which option she wanted to be true. By Sunday evening, the story had leaked to the media. Local news stations picked it up first. Portland developer missing under mysterious circumstances, and by Monday morning it had spread to the regional papers. The Oregonian ran a front-page story with Marcus's professional headshot and a photo of his abandoned BMW. Rachel's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, friends, distant relatives she hadn't spoken to in years. She stopped answering, let them all go to voicemail. Her supervisor at OHSU called to give her the week off, understanding that she couldn't possibly focus on caring for sick children while her own life was imploding. The police executed a search warrant on their home on Monday afternoon. Rachel watched as officers combed through Marcus's home office, his closet, their bedroom. They took his computer, boxes of financial documents, personal items she couldn't identify. Detective Chen supervised, her face professional and unreadable. "We're also searching his office downtown and the hotel room where he'd been staying," Chen informed her. "We need to build a complete picture of his life in the days before he vanished." On Tuesday, they brought Jennifer Hale back in for a second round of questioning. Rachel learned this from the news, seeing the young woman hurried into the precinct building, her face hidden behind oversized sunglasses, her lawyer at her side. The Chiron beneath the footage read, "Missing man's mistress questioned in disappearance." Rachel felt a grim satisfaction seeing Jennifer's public humiliation, but it was hollow. This whole situation had gone far beyond personal vendettas. Wednesday brought the first organized search. Volunteers gathered at Vista Point, spreading out through the dense forest surrounding the overlook. Search and rescue teams with dogs combed the area, looking for any sign that Marcus had wandered into the woods, perhaps injured or disoriented. They found nothing. Thursday, the police held a press conference. Detective Chen stood at a podium, cameras flashing, and appealed to the public for information. "If anyone saw Marcus Brennan on Friday, March 26th, if anyone has any information about his whereabouts, please contact Portland Police immediately. We're treating this as a missing person case, and we're pursuing all leads." Rachel watched from home, unable to face the media circus. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, her skin pale, her hair unwashed. She'd barely eaten in days. Her sister Emma flew in from Seattle, worried, insisting on staying with her. "You need to take care of yourself," Emma said, forcing Rachel to eat soup, to shower, to do the basic tasks of living. "Whatever Marcus did, you don't deserve to fall apart like this." But Rachel couldn't help it. The not knowing was torture. Every time her phone rang, she expected news, a body found, or Marcus walking into a police station somewhere, or something, anything, to end the terrible limbo. By Friday, a week after Marcus's disappearance, Rachel had become a prisoner in her own home. Reporters camped outside. Neighbors who'd once been friendly now looked at her with suspicion. She could see it in their eyes, hear it in the whispered conversations that stopped when she appeared. She must have done something. Why else would he disappear right after she caught him cheating? The police cleared her alibi. Security footage from OHSU confirmed she'd been at work during the critical window, but that didn't stop the speculation. Online forums and true crime enthusiasts picked up the case, spinning theories that ranged from plausible to absurd. Some thought Jennifer had killed him. Others believed Rachel had hired someone. A few suggested Marcus had faked his own death to escape both women. As Rachel lay in bed on Friday night, listening to rain pound against the windows, she realized that her life as she'd known it was over. Whether Marcus was found or not, whether he was alive or dead, nothing would ever be the same. She didn't know that the real answers to Marcus Brennan's disappearance were buried much deeper than anyone suspected, that his secrets went back years, to a life before Rachel, to debts and lies and an identity that wasn't quite what it seemed. The truth was waiting to be discovered, but it would take years, and when it finally emerged, it would be more shocking than anyone could have imagined. 3 months had passed since Marcus Brennan vanished, and the investigation had gone cold. It was late June 2010, and Portland was experiencing an unusually warm summer. The city had shed its gray winter coat for bright blue skies and temperatures that climbed into the 80s, drawing crowds to the waterfront and filling the outdoor cafes with people sipping iced coffee and pretending life was simple. But for Rachel Brennan, the sunshine felt like a mockery, an obscene contrast to the darkness that had swallowed her life. She sat across from Detective Sarah Chen in a small cafe in the Pearl District, far enough from her neighborhood that she was less likely to be recognized. Even so, she wore oversized sunglasses and a baseball cap, her auburn hair tucked beneath it. The notoriety had been suffocating. She'd been forced to take a leave of absence from OHSU after a patient's mother recognized her and caused a scene, accusing her of being a murderer, demanding she stay away from her child. The hospital administration had been apologetic but firm. Until the situation resolved itself, Rachel needed to step back. "I wanted to update you in person," Chen said, stirring her black coffee with a wooden stick. She looked tired, dark shadows beneath her eyes that Rachel recognized from her own mirror. "We've hit dead ends on almost every front, but there are some developments I thought you should know about." Rachel's stomach tightened. "Did you find him?" "No, but we've uncovered some things about Marcus that don't add up. Things that suggest his life was considerably more complicated than anyone realized." Chen pulled out a tablet and opened a file. "We've spent the last 3 months digging into Marcus's background, his finances, his business dealings. What we found is concerning." She turned the screen toward Rachel. "This is Marcus's financial activity for the 6 months prior to his disappearance. Notice anything unusual?" Rachel studied the spreadsheet, numbers and dates blurring together. "I'm not sure what I'm looking for. Large cash withdrawals. The $20,000 we told you about wasn't the only one. Over 6 months, Marcus withdrew nearly $75,000 in cash from various accounts. Some joint, some personal investment accounts you had no access to. Always in amounts just under $10,000 to avoid automatic reporting to the IRS. Rachel felt like she'd been punched in the gut. $75,000? Where did it go? That's what we can't trace. Cash leaves no digital footprint, but it suggests Marcus was involved in something he didn't want anyone to know about." Chen swiped to another screen. "Then there's this. We finally got full access to Marcus's phone records and email accounts. He had a second phone, a burner essentially, that he used exclusively for certain communications. We found the records through cell tower data, but the phone itself is gone, disappeared with him." "What kind of communications?" "Calls to Las Vegas numbers. Specifically, to numbers associated with casinos and a private gambling club called the Meridian. It's an exclusive, invitation-only operation that caters to high rollers. We contacted them, and after some legal pressure, they confirmed that Marcus was a regular client. He'd been flying to Vegas every few weeks for the past year, gambling significant amounts." Rachel removed her sunglasses, staring at Chen in disbelief. "That's impossible. Marcus hated gambling. He always said it was a fool's tax, a waste of money, and I would have known if he was flying to Vegas regularly. We shared a calendar. I would have seen." She stopped, realization dawning. "The Bend trips. The business trips to check on the development." Chen nodded grimly. "We verified with the construction company in Bend. Marcus visited the site maybe once a month. All those other weekends? We believe he was in Las Vegas. He booked flights using a credit card you didn't know about, stayed at the Bellagio under his own name. He wasn't even trying to hide it from anyone except you." Rachel felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She'd cried enough over Marcus Brennan. How much did he lose? "We're still working with the casinos to get exact figures, but preliminary estimates suggest he was down at least $300,000 over the course of a year. Maybe more." $300,000. Rachel whispered the number, her mind reeling. "We have had savings, investments. Did he drain everything?" "Not everything, but significantly more than you probably realized. Your joint retirement account had been reduced by about 40%. He'd taken loans against his life insurance policies. He'd even mortgaged some commercial properties without telling David Kowalski, his business partner. David didn't know. Claims he didn't. We verified his story. The properties Marcus mortgaged were ones he owned individually, not through the partnership. He structured it so the loan payments came from accounts David had no visibility into." Rachel sat back in her chair, feeling dizzy. Every piece of information was like a hammer blow, demolishing not just her marriage but her entire understanding of who Marcus had been. "So you think gambling debts are why he disappeared? That someone came after him?" "It's a strong possibility. The Meridian Club is connected to some serious people. Not quite organized crime in the traditional sense, but not exactly legitimate either. When high rollers can't pay, they have ways of collecting. But here's where it gets stranger." Chen swiped to another document. "We've been looking into Marcus's past before he came to Portland. He told everyone he was from Sacramento, right? That he went to UC Davis, worked in commercial real estate in California before moving to Oregon in 1998? Yes, that's what he always said. We can't find any record of Marcus Brennan attending UC Davis. No enrollment records, no graduation records. The real estate firm he claimed to work for in Sacramento, it existed, but they have no record of anyone named Marcus Brennan ever being employed there. Rachel felt the world tilting again. What are you saying? I'm saying we're not entirely sure Marcus Brennan is who he claimed to be, or at least his background has significant holes in it. We found records of a Marcus Brennan from Sacramento, who matches the general profile, age, physical description, but that Marcus Brennan died in a car accident in 1997. The cafe suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. Rachel could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Are you telling me my husband stole a dead person's identity? We don't know for certain yet. It's possible it's a coincidence Marcus isn't an uncommon name, but we've sent the information to the FBI. They're looking into whether Marcus might have been living under an assumed identity, and if so, who he really was. Rachel stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Several other patrons glanced over. I need air. I can't. This is too much. Chen stood as well, putting a hand on Rachel's arm. I know this is overwhelming, but you need to understand what we're dealing with here. If Marcus was using a false identity, if he owed serious money to dangerous people, if he had secrets going back decades, any of these things could explain his disappearance. But it also means we might never find him. People who know how to disappear, who've already done it once, they know how to stay gone. Outside the cafe, Rachel leaned against the brick wall, gulping in the warm summer air. Pedestrians streamed past. Young professionals, tourists with cameras, a homeless man pushing a shopping cart, normal people living normal lives. Rachel wasn't sure she'd ever be normal again. What about Jennifer? Rachel asked when Chen joined her outside. Where does she fit into all this? We've cleared her of direct involvement in the disappearance. Her alibi is solid. She was at work in the office until 8 p.m. on the day Marcus vanished, confirmed by multiple colleagues and security footage. But, Chen hesitated. But what? Jennifer knew about the gambling. She admitted it during our third interview. Marcus had confided in her about his debts, had been using her to help hide some of the financial maneuvering from David and from you. She claims she didn't know the full extent of it, that she thought it was just a few bad bets, not hundreds of thousands. She also claims Marcus told her he was working on a solution, that he had a way to fix everything. What solution? She doesn't know, or won't say. We've pushed hard, but she maintains Marcus never gave her details, just said he had a plan to settle his debts and make everything right. Rachel laughed bitterly. A plan, of course he did. Marcus always had a plan. He was always so sure he could talk his way out of anything, charm anyone, solve any problem. She looked at Chen directly. Do you think he's dead, detective? Your honest opinion. Chen was quiet for a long moment, watching a streetcar rumble past. Honestly, I think Marcus Brennan orchestrated his own disappearance. I think the gambling debts were real, the false identity was real, and I think he saw the walls closing in. You discovering the affair, his financial house of cards about to collapse, possibly people he owed money to getting impatient. I think he planned an exit strategy, and that abandoned car was the final misdirection. Then why leave the wallet, the phone, the money? Because he had other resources. Other identities, maybe. Other accounts in other names. The Marcus Brennan identity had run its course, become too complicated, too dangerous. So he shed it like a snake shedding its skin and became someone else. Rachel absorbed this theory, testing it against what she knew of Marcus. The man she'd married had been confident, charismatic, always thinking 3 steps ahead. Could he have been planning his exit even while sleeping next to her every night? Could he have been that calculating, that cold? If you're right, Rachel said slowly. If he's out there somewhere living a new life, does that mean I'm still married to him? Legally, that's a question for a lawyer, not a detective. But typically, you can petition to have someone declared legally dead after 7 years of absence. Until then, Chen shrugged. You're in limbo. 7 years. Rachel couldn't imagine sustaining this nightmare for 7 more years. The investigation, the suspicion, the media attention, the financial uncertainty. Everything Marcus owned was tied up in the missing person case. She couldn't sell the house, couldn't access certain accounts, couldn't move forward with her life. There's one more thing, Chen said, pulling out her phone. We found this email in Marcus's deleted folder. It was sent to him 3 days before he disappeared, from an anonymous account that we've been unable to trace. She showed Rachel the screen. The email was brief. Time's up. Friday at Vista Point, 3 p.m. Come alone and bring what you owe, or everyone learns who you really are. No more extensions. Rachel read it 3 times, her blood running cold. This is a threat. Someone was blackmailing him, or collecting a debt. We don't know who sent it, but the timing is significant. Marcus disappeared on Friday, and Vista Point is where his car was found. If this was a meeting, something went very wrong. So maybe he didn't orchestrate his disappearance. Maybe he was murdered. It's possible, but we've searched that entire area. Dogs, ground-penetrating radar, volunteers combing every inch of forest for miles around. If Marcus was killed and buried there, we would have found something. A body, clothing, evidence of digging, there's nothing. Rachel handed the phone back, her mind spinning with possibilities. None of them good. What happens now? Where does the investigation go from here? We keep working the FBI angle on the identity question. We keep pressure on the Vegas connections, see if anyone knows anything about Marcus's disappearances, or if anyone saw him after March 26th. We follow up on reported sightings. Chen grimaced. We've had dozens of people claim they saw Marcus in different states, California, Arizona, even one from Florida. Most are mistaken identity or attention seekers, but we have to check each one. And me? Am I still a suspect? You're a person of interest until this case is closed. But between your alibi and the evidence we've uncovered about Marcus's secret life, you're not at the top of our list anymore. The focus has shifted to understanding who Marcus really was, and who might have wanted him gone. They talked for a few more minutes, but Rachel barely heard the words. Her mind kept returning to that email, to the image of Marcus driving to Vista Point knowing he was meeting someone dangerous, knowing his lies were about to catch up with him. Had he been scared? Had he tried to run? Or had he walked into that meeting with his characteristic confidence, believing he could negotiate his way out of anything? That evening, Rachel sat in her living room, their living room, though it felt less like theirs every day, with a glass of wine and Marcus's old photo albums spread across the coffee table. She'd retrieved them from a box in the basement, albums from before they'd met, back when everything was supposedly normal. There he was in his 20s, standing in front of the Golden Gate Bridge, arms around friends whose names Rachel didn't know. Another photo showed him at what looked like a college graduation, cap and gown, diploma in hand, except Detective Chen had said there was no record of him graduating from UC Davis. Was this photo staged? Or was this from some other college under some other name? She found a photo of Marcus with his parents, or at least the people he'd told her were his parents. Frank and Margaret Brennan, supposedly retired in Arizona. Rachel had met them only twice, once at the wedding and once at a brief Christmas visit. They died in a house fire in 2003, or so Marcus had told her. She'd been devastated for him, had held him while he grieved. Had that been real, or another lie? Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Mrs. Brennan, this is Special Agent Robert Mitchell with the FBI. Detective Chen gave me your number. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss your husband's case. There are some developments regarding his identity that I need to share with you. Rachel closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. More bad news? Information, Mitchell corrected gently. Whether it's bad or good depends on your perspective. Can you meet me at 10 a.m. at the Federal Building downtown? She agreed and hung up, pouring herself another glass of wine. Outside, the summer evening was golden and beautiful. Children playing in a neighbor's yard, someone grilling food, the smell of charcoal and marinade drifting through her open window. Normal life, continuing around her while her own existence had become a surreal nightmare. Rachel picked up a photo of Marcus from their honeymoon in Hawaii, his smile bright, his arm around her waist, both of them young and hopeful and in love. Or at least, she had been in love. Who knew what Marcus had been feeling? Who knew if Marcus was even his real name? She'd thought discovering his affair was the worst betrayal possible. Now she understood it had only been the surface, the first crack in a facade that concealed something far deeper and darker. Tomorrow she would meet with the FBI. Tomorrow she would learn more about the stranger she'd married. But tonight, Rachel Brennan sat alone in a house full of ghosts and lies, and wondered if she would ever know the truth about Marcus Brennan, or whoever he really was. The investigation was far from over. In fact, in many ways, it was just beginning. The FBI field office in downtown Portland was a stark modern building of glass and concrete that seemed designed to intimidate. Rachel passed through multiple security checkpoints, surrendering her phone and bag, before being escorted to a windowless conference room on the 4th floor. The walls were bare except for a large seal of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the fluorescent lights gave everything a harsh, clinical quality. Special Agent Robert Mitchell was already waiting, a slim man in his early 50s with iron gray hair and the kind of intense, focused demeanor that suggested he didn't waste time on small talk. Beside him sat a younger woman with dark curly hair pulled into a professional bun. "Mrs. Brennan, thank you for coming. I'm Agent Mitchell, and this is Agent Lisa Reeves. Please, have a seat." He gestured to a chair across the table, where several thick folders were already arranged in neat stacks. "Can we get you anything? Water, coffee?" "Water would be good," Rachel said, her mouth suddenly dry. She'd barely slept, her mind racing with possibilities about what the FBI had discovered. Agent Reeves poured water from a pitcher into a plastic cup and slid it across the table. Rachel took a sip, the cool liquid doing little to calm her nerves. "Mrs. Brennan," Mitchell began, opening the top folder. "What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. We've been working with Detective Chen and the Portland police to understand your husband's background, and what we've uncovered is complex. Before I begin, I need to ask you, in all your years with Marcus Brennan, did he ever mention the name Michael Castellano?" Rachel searched her memory, but the name meant nothing. "No. Who is that?" Mitchell exchanged a glance with Reeves before continuing. "Michael Anthony Castellano was born in Newark, New Jersey in 1965. He grew up in a working-class Italian neighborhood, the youngest of 3 brothers. His father, Anthony Castellano, had connections to organized crime. Nothing major, but enough to put the family on law enforcement's radar. Michael was smart, ambitious, wanted to get away from that life. He went to Rutgers University, got a degree in business administration, and started working in real estate development in Atlantic City." Rachel felt a chill creep up her spine. "You're saying Marcus was this Michael person?" "Let me finish," Mitchell said gently. "In 1995, Michael Castellano got involved with the wrong people. He was working on a major casino development deal in Atlantic City, and he started skimming money. Not from the mob, thankfully, but from his legitimate investors. We're talking about $2 million that he funneled into offshore accounts. When the investors discovered the fraud, they pressed charges. Michael was looking at serious prison time, 10 to 20 years for wire fraud, money laundering, securities violations. But he never went to prison," Rachel said slowly, beginning to understand. "No, because Michael Castellano disappeared in December 1996, vanished without a trace. The FBI opened an investigation, but we had limited resources at the time, and frankly, there were bigger fish to fry. The case went cold. And then, in 1998, Marcus Brennan appeared in Portland, Oregon, with a complete background, credentials, and a new life." Mitchell pushed a photograph across the table. It showed a young man in his early 30s, darker hair than Marcus's, a fuller face, but the eyes, those deep brown eyes, were unmistakable. Rachel had looked into those eyes for 16 years. "This is Michael Castellano in 1995, Mitchell said. "And this," he placed another photo beside it, "is your husband's driver's license photo from 2009. The resemblance was undeniable, even accounting for aging and the deliberate changes. Different hairstyle, lighter color, different facial hair, weight loss. But the bone structure, the eyes, the slight crook in the nose, it was the same man." "Oh my God," Rachel whispered. "I was married to a fugitive for 16 years. "You were married to a man living under a stolen identity," Reeves clarified. "The real Marcus Brennan, as Detective Chen told you, died in Sacramento in 1997. Michael Castellano somehow obtained his identity documents, birth certificate, social security number, and became him. It's sophisticated identity theft, the kind that requires connections and money to pull off." Rachel felt numb, disconnected from her body. "So everything he told me about his past was a lie? His family? His education? Everything?" "Most of it, yes. We've been digging into Michael Castellano's real history. His actual parents, Anthony and Maria Castellano, are both deceased. His brothers are still in New Jersey. We contacted them. They had no idea what happened to Michael, thought he might be dead. One of them, Vincent Castellano, agreed to speak with us." Mitchell pulled out a transcript. "Vincent told us that Michael was always the ambitious one, always wanted more than the neighborhood could offer. He said Michael got greedy, got in over his head with the casino deal, and when everything fell apart, he vanished. Vincent assumed Michael had been killed by the investors or had died somewhere running. He never imagined his brother had successfully created a new identity and new life across the country." "Did Vincent know about the gambling problem?" Rachel asked, grasping at straws, trying to understand if anything about Marcus had been real. Vincent said gambling was always Michael's weakness. Even as a kid, he was making bets, running poker games. It's in their blood. Their father was a gambler too, lost most of what he made to the horses and cards. So when we learned about Marcus's Las Vegas debts, it made sense. Michael Castellano's demons followed him into his new identity. Rachel stared at the photos, at the two versions of the same man. Michael and Marcus separated by a stolen identity and a continent. The people he owed money to in Vegas, did they know who he really was? We don't believe so. He was careful, used the Marcus Brennan identity consistently. But here's where it gets more complicated. Mitchell opened another folder. Remember that email Marcus received 3 days before he disappeared? The one threatening to expose who he really was? We traced it. It came from Atlantic City. Rachel's breath caught. Someone from his past found him. We believe so. We think someone connected to the original fraud case, possibly one of the investors he stole from or someone they hired, tracked him down after all these years. The threat in the email wasn't about the Vegas debts. It was about Michael Castellano's true identity, about the $2 million he stole in 1995. So what happened at Vista Point? Rachel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Was he killed? Reeves leaned forward. That's what we're trying to determine. We've been working with our organized crime division, looking into the investors from the original case. One of them, a man named Leonard Voss, died in 2008. But his son, Craig Voss, has been quite vocal over the years about wanting justice for his father's losses. Leonard lost everything in that casino deal, his business, his home, his marriage. He died broke and bitter. Craig blamed Michael Castellano for destroying his family. You think Craig Voss found Marcus, found Michael, and confronted him? We think it's possible. Craig Voss has an alibi for March 26, 2010. He was at work in Atlantic City, confirmed by multiple witnesses and security footage. But that doesn't mean he couldn't have sent someone. We're investigating his associates, looking for anyone who might have traveled to Oregon that week. Mitchell pulled out another document. But here's another theory, one that Detective Chen raised. What if Michael, knew someone was coming for him? What if he saw that email as his warning that the Marcus Brennan identity was compromised, and he used Vista Point as his staging ground for another disappearance? You think he faked his own death again? Rachel said flatly. Or his own kidnapping? Think about it. The car left running, wallet and phone inside, positioned at an isolated overlook. It looks like foul play. It gives him cover to disappear while everyone searches for a body or investigates potential suspects. Meanwhile, Michael Castellano becomes someone else, somewhere else, starting his third life. Rachel felt anger rising through the numbness. If he's alive, if he orchestrated this whole thing, that means he left me to deal with all of this. The investigation, the suspicion, the media, the financial disaster. He ruined my life and then vanished. If he's alive, Reeves said carefully, he's a federal fugitive. The original charges from 1996 are still active. The statute of limitations doesn't run while a suspect is in hiding. If we find Michael Castellano, he'll face prosecution for the Atlantic City fraud, plus additional charges for identity theft and fraud committed as Marcus Brennan. What about the life insurance policies? Rachel asked, a bitter edge to her voice. Michael, whoever he is, he had significant life insurance. Am I entitled to that? Not until he's declared legally dead, which, as you know, takes 7 years. And even then, if there's evidence he faked his death, the insurance companies will fight the claim. Insurance fraud is a serious crime. Mitchell's expression softened slightly. Mrs. Brennan, I understand this is devastating. You're a victim in all of this. You had no knowledge of Michael Castellano or his criminal past. You married him in good faith, believing he was Marcus Brennan. How could I have been so blind? Rachel asked, more to herself than to the agents. 16 years. How did I not see that he was lying about everything? Because he was good at it, Reeves said. Michael Castellano successfully maintained a false identity for over a decade. He built a business, relationships, a marriage. He was meticulous, careful. These kinds of long-term identity frauds are rare precisely because they're so difficult to sustain. Most people slip up within months or a few years. Michael made it 12 years before his gambling addiction started creating cracks in his facade. Mitchell gathered the photos, stacking them neatly. We're going to keep investigating. We're following up on every lead. The Vegas connections, the Atlantic City connections, reported sightings. If Michael Castellano is out there, we'll find him eventually. These guys almost always make a mistake. They get comfortable, They use an old credit card, they contact someone from their past. Something always trips them up. And if he's dead? Rachel asked. If something really did happen to him at Vista Point, then eventually we'll find evidence of that too. Bodies are hard to hide permanently, especially in areas that get as much foot traffic as the mountains around Portland. Hikers find remains all the time, sometimes years or decades after the fact. The meeting continued for another hour, with Rachel answering questions about Marcus's behavior in the months before his disappearance, about any unusual phone calls or visitors, about his relationship with Jennifer Hale. She told them everything she knew, though it felt increasingly meaningless. She hadn't known Marcus at all. How could she provide useful information about a man who didn't really exist? As she was leaving, Agent Reeves walked her to the elevator. Mrs. Brennan, I know this doesn't help much, but try not to blame yourself. People like Michael Castellano are professional deceivers. It's who they are. You were dealing with someone who had decades of practice lying, who created an entire fictional life. Even trained investigators miss these things sometimes. Rachel nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The elevator doors opened and she stepped inside, turning to face forward as they began to close. Oh, one more thing, Reeves said quickly, holding the door. We found something else in Marcus's records. He had a storage unit in Gresham that he rented under a different name. We executed a search warrant yesterday. Inside we found $50,000 in cash, 3 sets of false identity documents with different names and photos, and a file on Craig Voss with newspaper clippings about the Atlantic City fraud case. He knew someone was looking for him. He'd been preparing for this. The doors closed before Rachel could respond. She rode down to the ground floor in silence, collected her phone and bag from security, and walked out into the bright July afternoon. Portland was bustling with summer energy. Food carts on every corner, cyclists cruising past, tourists consulting maps and smartphones looking for the next Instagram-worthy location. Rachel walked aimlessly for blocks, her mind unable to process everything she'd learned. Michael Castellano, Newark, New Jersey, Atlantic City fraud, $2 million, a whole life that had existed before Marcus Brennan, before her, before everything she thought was real. She found herself at Waterfront Park, standing at the railing overlooking the Willamette River. A paddle wheeler moved slowly upriver, tourists visible on its decks. A young couple sat on a nearby bench laughing at something on their phone. Everything looked so normal, so simple. Rachel's phone buzzed. A text from her sister Emma. How did it go? Call me when you can. But Rachel didn't call. She couldn't face explaining this to anyone yet. Couldn't bear to say out loud that her entire marriage had been built on a foundation of fraud and lies. That the man she'd loved, the man she'd shared her bed and her life with for 16 years, didn't even really exist. She thought about the affair with Jennifer, about how angry and betrayed she'd felt discovering them at that motel. How trivial that seemed now. Marcus sleeping with his assistant was nothing compared to the magnitude of his real deceptions. She'd thought infidelity was the worst betrayal a spouse could commit. She'd had no idea. As the sun began to set over Portland, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Rachel made a decision. She would sell the house, or try to, once the legal complications were sorted out. She would leave Portland, leave Oregon, start over somewhere new where no one knew her as that woman whose husband disappeared or the wife of the con man. She would rebuild her life from scratch, just like Michael Castellano had done in 1998. The difference was, she would do it honestly. She would be herself, fully and completely, no matter how painful that was. She would never lie about who she was or where she came from. She'd had enough of lies to last a lifetime. Her phone rang. Detective Chen. Rachel, the FBI briefed me on their findings. I'm so sorry, I don't even have words for how messed up this is. Yeah, Rachel said quietly. That about sums it up. Listen, I want you to know that the Portland police are officially closing our investigation into you as a suspect. Given everything we now know about Michael Castellano's history and his pattern of disappearing when cornered, we're confident you had no involvement in his vanishing. I know that doesn't change what you've been through, but at least that cloud is lifted. Thank you, Detective. Call me Sarah. I think we've been through enough that we can drop the formalities. There was a pause. Are you okay? Do you have someone with you? I'm okay. My sister is in town. I'll be fine. If you need anything at all, you call me. And Rachel, whatever happens with this case, however it ends, you're going to survive this. You're stronger than you think. Rachel ended the call and stood there as darkness fell over the city. watching lights flicker on across the river, watching Portland transform from day to night. Somewhere out there, Michael Castellano might be watching similar lights in a different city, under a different name, starting another fake life. Or his body might be decomposing in a shallow grave in the Cascade Mountains, payment for crimes committed a lifetime ago. Either way, Rachel realized, it didn't matter to her anymore. Marcus Brennan, Michael Castellano, whoever he was gone from her life, and slowly, painfully, she would learn to live with that absence, to build something real from the ruins he'd left behind. The investigation might not be over. The FBI might search for years. But for Rachel, this chapter was closing. The truth had emerged, brutal and devastating, but at least it was the truth. And truth, no matter how painful, was better than living a lie. 4 years had passed since Marcus Brennan vanished, and the case had become another unsolved mystery, gathering dust in the Portland Police Bureau's cold case files. It was now spring 2014, and Rachel sat in a small apartment in Seattle, Washington, nursing a cup of herbal tea and staring at her laptop screen. She'd moved to Seattle 18 months after Marcus's disappearance, once the legal tangles had been partially resolved and the media attention had finally died down. The house in Portland had sold at a loss. Too much negative publicity, too many curiosity seekers driving by, too many memories soaked into the walls. She'd taken what money she could salvage from the wreckage of her marriage and started over in a new city where no one knew her story. She'd gone back to nursing, working at Seattle Children's Hospital in their oncology department. The work was hard, emotionally draining, but it gave her purpose. Caring for sick children, supporting their families through the worst moments of their lives. It reminded her that her own trauma, while significant, wasn't the only suffering in the world. She'd grown closer to her patients' parents, understanding their fear and helplessness in ways she never could have before her own life imploded. Now, at 45 years old, Rachel had built something resembling a normal life. She had a small circle of friends who knew only that she was divorced, not the details of how or why. She dated occasionally, though she'd developed a wariness about trust that made real intimacy difficult. She went to therapy every other week, working through the layers of betrayal and deception, learning to forgive herself for not seeing through Michael's, lies. But she still thought about him every day, still wondered if he was alive or dead, if he thought about her, if any of it had been real. Her laptop was open to a website she visited more than she wanted to admit, Unsolved Mysteries.com, where amateur detectives and true crime enthusiasts discussed cases like Marcus's. The thread about his disappearance had been active for years, with hundreds of posts debating theories, analyzing evidence, posting supposed sightings that never led anywhere. User Cascade Truther just drove past Vista Point today. Still gives me chills thinking about the Brennan case. That car sitting there with everything inside, it's like he just evaporated. User PDX Native 1979. My theory remains that the wife hired someone. That whole I was at work alibi is too convenient. She found out about the affair, wanted revenge, staged it to look like mob hit or whatever. User Mystery Maven, 8PDX Native 1979. FBI cleared her completely. Read the actual case files before spreading conspiracy theories. This was about Castellano's past catching up with him. User Vegas Insider. I dealt cards at Bellagio in 2010. I remember Brennan Castellano. Big tipper, confident player, but I could tell he was in over his head. Guys like that always think the next hand will fix everything. I've seen it 1,000 times. He either owed the wrong people and got disappeared, or he saw an opportunity to vanish and took it. Rachel closed the laptop, unable to read more. These strangers dissecting her life, making judgments about her marriage, about Marcus, about what happened. It made her feel exposed and powerless all over again. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma, her sister. Coffee this weekend? Haven't seen you in weeks. You're not isolating again, are you? Rachel smiled despite herself. Emma had been her anchor through everything, flying up from her home in Tacoma regularly to check on her, forcing her to eat and socialize and remember she was still alive. Sunday at 11? The usual place? Perfect. Love you, sis. Rachel was about to set her phone down when another text came through. This one from an unknown number. Rachel Brennan? This is Agent Lisa Reeves, FBI. We need to talk. Can you call me as soon as possible? Her heart started racing. In 4 years, she'd had minimal contact with the FBI. They'd closed their active investigation into Michael Castellano's whereabouts about 18 months ago, determining that without new leads or evidence, they were at a dead end. The case remained open, but it was no longer a priority. For them to contact her now after all this time meant something had happened, something significant. Rachel's hands trembled as she dialed the number. "Agent Reeves," came the crisp, professional voice she remembered. "This is Rachel Brennan. You texted me? Rachel, thank you for calling back so quickly. I need you to sit down for this conversation. Are you somewhere private? I'm at home. Alone. What's happened? Did you find him?" There was a pause, the kind that stretched just a fraction too long, and Rachel knew. She knew before Reeves said the words. "Hikers found human remains in the Mount Hood National Forest yesterday morning. Based on preliminary examination and items found with the body, we believe it's Michael Castellano. We need you to provide dental records to confirm identification." Rachel felt the room spin. After 4 years of wondering, of living in limbo, of half-believing Marcus was alive somewhere under another name, the answer had been in the Oregon wilderness all along. "Where exactly was he found?" she asked, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "About 15 miles from Vista Point, much deeper into the forest than the original search parameters covered. The remains were partially buried in a ravine, covered by years of leaf litter and undergrowth. A couple hiking off trail with their dog stumbled across the site. Rachel, I need to warn you. What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult. Based on the forensic examination, this wasn't an accident or natural death. Michael Castellano was murdered. How do you know? There's a bullet wound in the skull. A single shot to the back of the head, execution style. The body was then dragged into the ravine and hastily covered. We've recovered the remains and some personal effects that survived. A watch, a belt buckle, metal buttons from his clothing. The coroner estimates time of death consistent with March 2010, which matches the timeline of his disappearance. Rachel closed her eyes, trying to process this information. Michael, had been dead this whole time, while she'd been wondering if he was living a new life, laughing at how thoroughly he'd deceived everyone. His body had been decomposing in a forest ravine. "Do you know who did it?" she asked. "We have a strong suspect." "Rachel, do you remember Craig Voss? Leonard Voss's son from the Atlantic City fraud case?" "Yes. You thought he might have been involved, but he had an alibi. He did have an alibi for being in Atlantic City on March 26, 2010. But we've been investigating his associates and we found something. Craig Voss hired a private investigator in 2009 to track down Michael Castellano. That investigator, a man named Dennis Korvac, has a history of working for clients who want problems handled. We've been building a case against him for another matter, and during that investigation we found evidence linking him to Oregon in late March 2010. Evidence like what? Cell phone records placing him in the Portland area, rental car records, credit card transactions at gas stations along Highway 26, and most significantly, we found photographs on his personal computer, surveillance photos of Michael Castellano taken in the weeks before his death, photos of the house you and Marcus lived in, photos of Marcus leaving his office, photos of him meeting Jennifer Hale at the Cascade View motel. Rachel felt sick. Someone had been watching Marcus, stalking him, planning his murder while she'd been going about her daily life completely unaware. So this Korvac person killed him? We believe so. We think Craig Voss paid Korvac to find Michael Castellano and recover the money he stole, or extract revenge if the money couldn't be recovered. Korvac tracked him for weeks, learning his patterns, his movements. Then he sent that threatening email, luring Michael to Vista Point for what was supposed to be a meeting. But there was no meeting, just an execution. And the car, the wallet and phone left behind, staged to look like an abduction or voluntary disappearance. Korvac wanted investigators looking in the wrong direction while he disposed of the body. It almost worked. If not for those hikers and their dog going off trail, we might never have found Michael's remains. Rachel was silent for a long moment, staring out her apartment window at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere in this city, people were living normal lives, going to work, falling in love, raising children, experiencing joy and sorrow in ordinary ways. She'd forgotten what that felt like. "What happens now?" she finally asked. "We're arresting Dennis Korvac today on murder charges. We have enough evidence to prosecute. Craig Voss is also being charged as an accessory and for solicitation of murder. Both men will face trial. You'll likely be called as a witness, not about the murder itself since you obviously weren't involved, but to establish the history, the connection between Michael Castellano and the Voss family, the financial fraud that motivated all of this." "Will I have to testify about the affair?" About finding Marcus with Jennifer? Possibly. The prosecution will need to establish Michael's state of mind in the days before his death, his behavior patterns. But your testimony won't be the focus. The physical evidence and Korvac's digital trail are what will convict him. After the call ended, Rachel sat motionless for nearly an hour, watching shadows lengthen across her apartment as afternoon turned to evening. She should call Emma, should call her therapist, should do something, but she felt paralyzed by the weight of this revelation. Marcus was dead, had been dead all along, shot in the back of the head and left in a ravine like garbage. Whatever his crimes, whatever lies he'd told, he hadn't deserved that. No one deserved that. And she realized with a strange sense of grief that some part of her had been hoping he was alive, that despite everything he'd done to her, despite the lies and betrayal and fraud, she'd wanted him to be somewhere safe, living whatever life he'd chosen, because the alternative, that he'd died violently and alone, murdered for sins committed decades ago, was too bleak, too final. Her phone rang again. Detective Sarah Chen from Portland. Rachel, I just heard from the FBI. I wanted to call personally, make sure you're okay. This is, hell, I don't even know what to say. After all these years to finally have an answer, but an answer like this. I don't know how I feel, Rachel admitted. Is that strange? I should be angry or relieved or something, but I just feel empty. There's no right way to feel about this. You've been through something most people can't even imagine. Learning your husband was murdered after learning he wasn't who you thought he was. It's layer upon layer of trauma. Have you called your therapist? Not yet. Do that. Tonight. Promise me. I promise. Rachel, I also want you to know, the Portland police are officially closing the case now. Marcus Brennan's disappearance is solved. It wasn't suicide, it wasn't voluntary disappearance, and it sure as hell wasn't anything you did. You were a victim in all of this from beginning to end. I hope you can start to really believe that now. That night, Rachel did call her therapist, Dr. Patricia Morrison, who scheduled an emergency session for the following morning. She also called Emma, who immediately offered to drive up from Tacoma, but Rachel declined. She needed to be alone, to sit with this information, to process it in her own way. She pulled out a box she kept in her closet, one she hadn't opened in over a year. Inside were the few items she'd kept from her marriage, photos she couldn't bring herself to destroy, Marcus's watch that he'd left behind when he moved out, their wedding album. She'd kept these things not out of love but out of a need for evidence, proof that she hadn't imagined those 16 years, that they'd actually happened. Now she spread the photos across her living room floor and looked at them with new eyes. Their wedding day, both of them young and hopeful, a vacation to Mexico, Christmas mornings, anniversary dinners. In every photo, Marcus smiled at the camera or at her, looking relaxed and genuine. Had any of it been real? Or had Michael Castellano been acting every single moment, playing the role of devoted husband while hiding a past built on fraud and a present built on lies? She picked up their wedding photo, studying Marcus's face. Who were you? She asked the image. Who were you really? The photo offered no answers, just that frozen smile, that captured moment from a day that seemed like it had happened to someone else entirely. The following weeks brought a media frenzy that dwarfed the original coverage of Marcus's disappearance. The story had everything journalists loved: mystery, murder, fraud, false identities, a cross-country conspiracy. Rachel found herself besieged by interview requests, which she declined. Television producers wanted to make documentaries about the case. True crime podcasters wanted her to tell her story. She refused them all. The trial of Dennis Korvac began in November 2014 in federal court in Portland. Rachel flew down for her testimony, staying with Emma in Tacoma and commuting to the courthouse each day. The courtroom was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and Michael's, former business associates and friends, all trying to understand how this had happened. Rachel testified for 3 hours, answering questions about her marriage, about Marcus's behavior in the months before his death, about discovering his affair. The defense attorney tried to suggest that perhaps Rachel had hired Korvac herself, that maybe the affair had pushed her to seek revenge. But the prosecutor quickly demolished that theory with evidence of Rachel's complete ignorance about Michael's true identity and her solid alibi. Jennifer Hale also testified, looking older and more tired than Rachel remembered. She'd lost her job at Marcus's company after the scandal, had moved back to California to live with her parents, had spent years in therapy dealing with the guilt and trauma. On the stand, she cried as she described her relationship with Marcus, how he'd told her he loved her, how he'd promised to leave Rachel, how she'd believed his lies just as thoroughly as Rachel had. The most damaging testimony came from Craig Voss himself, who'd agreed to testify against Korvac in exchange for a reduced sentence. He admitted to hiring the private investigator, to paying him $50,000 to find Michael Castellano and make sure he paid for what he did to my father. But he claimed he'd only wanted the money back, that he never explicitly ordered a murder. I told Korvac to find him to scare him to get our money back, Voss testified, his voice shaking. I never said to kill him. I never wanted that. But Korvac, he did this on his own because that's what he does. He's a killer. I was stupid and angry, and I hired the wrong person. And now a man is dead because of my mistake. Korvac's defense argued that Voss was lying to save himself, that Voss had absolutely ordered the hit, that make sure he paid was code for murder. But the jury wasn't convinced. They found Dennis Korvac guilty of first-degree murder and Craig Voss guilty as an accessory after the fact. Korvac was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Voss received 20 years. Rachel was in the courtroom when the verdicts were read. She felt no satisfaction, no sense of justice served, just a profound weariness, a desire for all of this to finally be over. After the trial, she gave one statement to the press, reading from a prepared text on the courthouse steps. Marcus Brennan was not a perfect man. He lied to me, betrayed me, and lived a life built on deception. But he was still a human being who deserved to live, who deserved the chance to face justice through the legal system, not to be executed in a forest and left to rot. I hope these convictions bring some closure to everyone affected by this tragedy. As for me, I'm ready to move forward with my life. I'm ready to finally let go of the past and build something real and honest for my future. Thank you. She walked away from the microphones without taking questions, climbed into Emma's car, and left Portland for what she hoped would be the last time. Back in Seattle, Rachel slowly began to rebuild in earnest. She started dating more seriously, eventually meeting a fellow nurse named David Chen, no relation to Detective Sarah Chen, who knew her story but didn't define her by it. She threw herself into her work at Seattle Children's, eventually becoming a head nurse in the oncology department. She reconnected with old friends she'd pushed away during the worst of the scandal. She learned to smile genuinely again, to laugh without feeling guilty, to believe that happiness was something she was allowed to have. The years of silence, those 4 years between Marcus's disappearance and the discovery of his body, had been a kind of purgatory, a suspended state between one life and another. But now, finally, she was free. Free from the investigation, free from the suspicion, free from the not knowing. Marcus Brennan, Michael Castellano, was truly gone, and Rachel was truly ready to live again. 10 years after Marcus Brennan's disappearance, Rachel received a letter that would change everything she thought she knew about her late husband. It was March 2020, and the world was on the brink of a pandemic that would reshape society in ways no one could predict. Rachel was now 51 years old, living in a comfortable townhouse in Seattle's Ballard neighborhood with David, whom she'd married 2 years earlier in a small ceremony attended by close friends and family. She'd finally achieved something resembling peace, having processed years of trauma through therapy, time, and the slow, painful work of rebuilding trust in herself and others. She was head of pediatric oncology nursing at Seattle Children's Hospital now, respected by colleagues, loved by patients' families, living a life that felt authentic and earned. The Marcus Brennan chapter of her life had become something she could speak about clinically when asked, a terrible thing that had happened to her rather than something that defined her. She rarely thought about him anymore, and when she did, it was with a distant sadness rather than the raw anguish that had consumed her for so many years. The letter arrived on a Saturday morning in mid-March, forwarded from her old address in Portland through a chain of redirects until it finally reached her current home. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, expensive-looking. The return address was a law firm in Newark, New Jersey, Steinberg and Associates. Rachel opened it at her kitchen table while David made breakfast, the smell of coffee and bacon filling their sunny kitchen. Inside was a formal letter from an attorney named Harold Steinberg, along with several additional documents. Dear Ms. Brennan, I am writing to you regarding the estate of Michael Anthony Castellano, who was known to you as Marcus Brennan during your marriage. I understand this correspondence may come as a surprise, given the circumstances of Mr. Castellano's death and the subsequent criminal proceedings. I represent the interests of Mr. Castellano's estate, which has recently been settled after years of legal complications. As part of this settlement, certain information has come to light that I believe you have a right to know, both from a legal and moral standpoint. Enclosed, you will find documents that reveal aspects of Michael Castellanos' life that were not disclosed during the criminal investigation. These include evidence of a second marriage that predated his relationship with you, as well as information about children from that marriage. Additionally, there are financial assets that were held in trust and recently discovered, which may have bearing on your status as Mr. Castellanos' widow. I would like to arrange a time to speak with you by phone or in person to discuss these matters in detail. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, Harold Steinberg, Esquire. Rachel read the letter 3 times, her coffee growing cold in her mug. A second marriage. Children. After everything she'd learned, after all the lies that had been uncovered, there was still more. "David," she called out, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "I need you to read something." David came to the table, wiping his hands on a dish towel, his kind face showing immediate concern. He was 48, a pediatric surgeon she'd met through work, patient and steady in ways that had made Rachel feel safe enough to love again. He read the letter over her shoulder, his hand coming to rest on hers. "Jesus," he murmured. "After all this time, do you want to call this lawyer? You don't have to, you know. You could just throw it away. Walk away from whatever this is." Rachel considered this. She'd spent 10 years trying to move past Marcus, trying to build a new life. Opening this door might drag her back into that nightmare. But another part of her, the part that had always needed to understand, to know the truth no matter how painful, couldn't let it go. "I need to know," she said quietly. "I need to know who he really was. All of it, this time." She called Harold Steinberg's office Monday morning and arranged a video conference for that afternoon. When his face appeared on her laptop screen, she saw a man in his 70s with thinning white hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the weary expression of someone who'd spent a career dealing with complicated family secrets. "Ms. Brennan, or should I say Mrs. Chen, I understand you've remarried. Congratulations. Rachel is fine. Thank you for reaching out, Mr. Steinberg. Your letter mentioned a second marriage and children. I need you to tell me everything." Steinberg nodded, arranging papers on his desk. "I'll be direct, as I sense you appreciate that approach. Before Michael Castellano became Marcus Brennan, before he fled to Oregon in 1998, he was married to a woman named Angela DeMarco. They married in 1993 and had 2 children, a daughter, Isabella, born in 1994, and a son, Thomas, born in 1996. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. "He had children. He told me we couldn't have children, that we'd tried and it hadn't worked, but he already had children." "Yes." Angela filed for divorce in 1997, after Michael disappeared. The divorce was granted in absentia. She raised Isabella and Thomas alone in Newark, working multiple jobs, never receiving a penny of child support from Michael because no one could find him. She died of cancer in 2018, and the children, now adults, hired me to help settle her estate and track down their father, hoping he might have left something that could help them. But he was already dead by then, Rachel said. "Murdered in 2010. "Correct. However, in the process of searching for Michael Castellano, we discovered several things. First, we confirmed his identity as Marcus Brennan through the FBI's investigation. Second, we discovered that Michael had established a trust fund in 1995 before his life fell apart, with his children as beneficiaries. This trust was held by a bank in the Cayman Islands, deliberately obscured and difficult to trace. It contained approximately $800,000, money we believe was part of what he embezzled from the Atlantic City investors, money he'd hidden offshore before he disappeared. Rachel tried to process this information. Michael had hidden nearly $1 million in a trust for children he'd abandoned, children he'd never mentioned to her in 16 years of marriage. Did he ever try to contact them after he became Marcus Brennan? Not that we can determine. Isabella and Thomas have no memory of their father ever reaching out after he disappeared. He simply vanished from their lives when Isabella was 3 and Thomas was 1 year old. They grew up with stories about their father, some from Angela, some from Michael's brothers, but no actual relationship with him. And now they know he's dead. They know how he died. Yes, they've read the trial transcripts, the FBI reports. They know everything about Michael's second life as Marcus Brennan, including his marriage to you." Steinberg paused, adjusting his glasses. "Rachel, Isabella, and Thomas would like to speak with you if you're willing. They have questions about their father, about what kind of man he was in Oregon. They're not angry with you, they understand you were also a victim of Michael's deceptions, but they're trying to understand who their father was, and you knew him longer than almost anyone else in his post-1998 life. Rachel felt overwhelmed. She'd never imagined having to face Marcus's children, having to explain their father to them when she'd barely understood him herself. I don't know what I could tell them that would help. I didn't know the real Michael Castellano. I knew a fiction, a character he created. Perhaps that's exactly what they need to hear. That their father was capable of creating an entirely new life, of being someone else so completely that even his wife of 16 years never suspected. It might help them understand why he could abandon them so thoroughly. Rachel agreed to a meeting, though every instinct told her to protect herself, to maintain the boundaries she'd worked so hard to establish. But these were innocent people, victims of Michael's choices just as she was. They deserved whatever small truths she could offer. 2 weeks later, Isabella and Thomas Castellano flew to Seattle. Rachel met them at a quiet cafe near the waterfront, David waiting in the car nearby in case she needed support. She recognized them immediately when they walked in. Isabella had Marcus's dark eyes and sharp cheekbones, while Thomas had his build and the same way of carrying himself, confident but guarded. Isabella was 26 now, a graduate student studying social work at Rutgers. Thomas was 24, working as a paralegal in Newark. Both looked nervous, uncertain, carrying the weight of a father they'd never really known. "Thank you for meeting us," Isabella said as they sat down, her voice soft but steady. "I know this must be strange for you. It's strange for us too." "I'm glad you reached out," Rachel said, and was surprised to find she meant it. "I've spent 10 years trying to understand your father. Maybe together we can make sense of some of it." They talked for 3 hours, trading stories and memories, trying to piece together a complete picture of Michael Castellano from the fragments they each possessed. Isabella shared childhood memories, her father lifting her onto his shoulders, teaching her to ride a bike, reading her bedtime stories. But these memories ended abruptly when she was 3, replaced by absence and the pain of wondering why her daddy never came back. Thomas had no memories of Michael at all, just the space where a father should have been. Growing up, the other kids at school had dads who came to their games, taught them to drive, helped them with homework. I had Uncle Vincent who tried his best, but it wasn't the same. I used to make up stories about why my dad was gone, that he was a spy or in witness protection or had amnesia. Anything except the truth, which was that he just didn't want to be my father anymore. Rachel shared her own stories, carefully editing out the most painful details of the betrayal and affair. She told them about Marcus's, Michael's, work ethic, his charisma, the way he could make anyone feel important. She described his love of hiking, his terrible jokes, his obsessive organization of their garage, small human details that painted a picture of a real person rather than just a criminal or a ghost. "Did he ever mention us?" Isabella asked, her eyes searching Rachel's face. "Even once? Even by accident?" Rachel wanted to lie, to give them some comfort, but she'd lived with too many lies already. "No. He never mentioned children, never hinted at a past family. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you different." Isabella nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Thomas reached over and took his sister's hand, his jaw tight with suppressed emotion. "There's something you should know," Thomas said after a moment. "Something we discovered that even the FBI didn't find. About a year before he died, Michael, Dad, he set up an automatic email to be sent to Isabella if he ever died or disappeared. It was with some service that monitors death records and news reports. When his body was identified in 2014, the email was triggered and sent to Isabella's address. Rachel's heart began to race. "What did it say?" Isabella pulled out her phone and opened an email, turning the screen so Rachel could read it. "Dear Isabella, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. I don't know if you'll remember me. You were so young when I had to leave. I want you to know that leaving you and Tommy was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder even than the mistakes that forced me to disappear. I was a coward. I got in over my head with people I shouldn't have trusted, made decisions I can't take back. And when everything fell apart, I ran instead of facing the consequences. I've spent every day since regretting that choice, but by the time I realized what I'd given up, it was too late to come back. Too many years had passed. Too many lies had been told. I created a new life in Oregon. I got married again to a good woman who deserved better than me. I built a successful business. From the outside, it looked like I had everything, but I never stopped thinking about you and your brother. I never stopped wondering what kind of people you were becoming, Whether you looked like me or your mother, whether you hated me for leaving, I hope your mother told you that I loved you. I wasn't a good father, wasn't even present to be a father at all, but I did love you. I set up a trust fund with what money I could salvage before I ran. It's not enough. Nothing could ever be enough, but I hope it helps you build the lives you deserve. I'm sorry for everything I put you through. I'm sorry for being weak and selfish and broken. You deserved better. Your mother deserved better. Rachel deserves better. Everyone I've ever touched deserved better than what I gave them. If there's any justice in the universe, you grew up happy despite me, rather than because of me. I hope you found father figures who actually showed up. I hope you don't waste time hating me or trying to understand me. Some people are just mistakes walking around in human form, and I was one of them. I'm sorry. For everything. Those 2 words aren't enough, but they're all I have left. Your father, Rachel read the email twice, tears blurring her vision. This was the closest she'd ever come to hearing real honesty from Marcus. From Michael. Not the charming lies, not the careful deceptions, but actual truth about who he was and what he'd done. He knew he was broken, she said quietly. All along he knew. Doesn't make it better, Thomas said, his voice hard. Doesn't fix what he did to us, to Mom, to you. Feeling sorry doesn't change anything. No, Rachel agreed, but it's something. It's more than we had before. They talked a while longer, and before Isabella and Thomas left, Rachel gave them something she'd brought. A photo album from her marriage. Pictures of Marcus smiling, living, being human. These won't replace the father you never got to know, she said. But maybe they'll help you understand him a little better. He was more than his worst choices. He was also kind sometimes and funny, and capable of joy even if he couldn't sustain it. Isabella hugged Rachel tightly. Thank you for meeting us. Thank you for not hating us for existing. I could never hate you, Rachel said. You're not responsible for what your father did. None of us are responsible for his choices except him. After they left, Rachel sat in her car for a long time, staring out at Elliott Bay, watching ferries cross the gray water. David had texted to check on her, but she'd asked for a little more time alone. She thought about Michael Castellano, about all the lives he'd touched and damaged. His first wife, Angela, raising 2 children alone. Those children, growing up without a father. The investors he'd defrauded. Rachel herself deceived for 16 years. Jennifer Hale, used and discarded. David Kowalski and all the business associates who'd trusted him. The ripples of his lies and selfishness had spread so far, had caused so much pain. But she also thought about that email, about a man who knew he was destroying everything he touched but couldn't figure out how to stop. A man who ran from problems instead of facing them, who created new identities instead of fixing his real one, who carried guilt like a stone, but never found the courage to make amends. In some strange way, Rachel finally understood him, not forgave him. She didn't think she could ever fully forgive the depth of his betrayal, but she understood the psychology of it, the pattern of someone so broken by their own choices that they could only keep running, keep lying, keep creating new versions of themselves in hopes that one of them would finally work. It hadn't worked. It never could have worked. Michael Castellano's past had caught up with him in the form of Dennis Korvac and a bullet to the head, and now, 10 years after his death, his secrets were still emerging, still causing pain, still demanding to be acknowledged. But this, Rachel decided, would be the end of it. She'd met his children, heard his last message, understood as much as she was ever going to understand. There would be no more revelations, no more surprises. This was the final chapter of the Marcus Brennan story. She drove home to David, to the life they'd built together, to the future that was actually hers instead of borrowed or stolen or based on lies. She'd survived the worst that life could throw at her: betrayal, murder, scandal, a decade of trauma and recovery. She was stronger now than she'd ever been. That evening, she and David sat on their back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. She told him about the meeting, about Isabella and Thomas, about Michael's email. "Are you okay?" David asked, his arm around her shoulders. "I am," Rachel said, and realized it was true. "I really am. It's over now, all of it. The mystery is solved, the truth is told, and I can finally let go. No regrets? 1,000 regrets. But not about moving forward, not about choosing to live my life instead of staying trapped in his lies." As darkness fell over Seattle, Rachel Brennan, now Rachel Chen, felt something she hadn't felt in 10 years. Complete closure. The case was solved, the questions were answered, and the man she'd once loved was finally truly gone. She would never forget what had happened. The scars would always be there, but scars were proof of survival, proof that she'd endured the worst and come through to the other side. Michael Anthony Castellano, aka Marcus Brennan, was dead. His secrets were revealed. His victims had found some measure of peace, and Rachel was finally completely free. The unsolved case of Oregon 2010 was closed.